Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always. What fascinating world are we exploring today?
Today, we're tackling one of history's biggest hitters, Aristotle.
Ah, the OG philosopher. Where are we starting with him? His works are pretty massive.
We're diving into selections from Aristotle on the art of poetry, Aristotle's history of animals, the Athenian constitution, and, for good measure, the works of Aristotle, which covers, well, pretty much everything else.
Wow, covering the full spectrum, from analyzing plays to dissecting the Athenian government to, well, just trying to figure out what it means to exist. It's mind-boggling how much ground Aristotle covered.
Yeah, it's not a light undertaking. And instead of just going source by source, which would take, well, quite a while, I thought we could try tracing some of the themes that run through all these different works.
That's a great idea. It gives us a chance to see how Aristotle's mind worked across all these different fields. What's jumping out at you?
Well, one thing that strikes me is his emphasis on observation. Like in History of Animals, it's clear he was out there looking at the natural world, categorizing things, describing all sorts of creatures. He didn't just take other people's word for it. He went and saw for himself.
That's so crucial, isn't it? Even today, I think we sometimes forget how important it is to actually look at the world around us, question things, gather evidence for ourselves.
Totally. And it's not just about the natural world, right? Like in the Athenian constitution, he's super meticulous about documenting how that government evolved, not just the structures, but also like the personalities, the key events that shaped it all.
It's like he's saying, here's how it happened, folks, and here's why it matters. He's connecting those dots for us.
Exactly. But he doesn't stop at just like collecting the facts, right?
Hmm.
It seems like he's always trying to figure out like the underlying principles, the why behind the what.
Absolutely. He's obsessed with understanding the causes and purpose of things. Take his art of poetry, for example. He's not just saying what makes a good tragedy. He's trying to figure out why it affects us so powerfully.
Which is where that whole catharsis thing comes in,
Yeah.
right? The idea that experiencing a tragedy can actually like purge us of these heavy emotions.
Exactly. He believed that by engaging with these heightened emotions in a safe space through art, we could actually cleanse ourselves of fear and pity.
So you're saying watching a play could actually make you a better person? I'm not sure I'm buying that one.
Well, maybe not better in a moral sense, but lighter
Yeah.
emotionally. Think about how you feel after a really intense movie, something that gets your heart racing,
Oh yeah, totally. Like a good thriller or something. You're definitely feeling a lot of things during those.
Right, and then afterwards, often there's a sense of relief, even exhilaration. Aristotle thought tragedy gives us a way to process those intense emotions so we don't get bogged down by them.
Okay, I can see that. It's like a workout for your emotions.
Exactly. But it wasn't just about entertainment for him. This catharsis thing, it fits into his bigger philosophical picture.
So it's not just like, hey, let's go watch a play and feel better.
Right. For Aristotle, everything was connected. He saw art as a way to understand ourselves and the world, even the difficult parts.
And that drive to understand, to make sense of things through reason and observation, that's a thread that runs through all his work, right?
Yeah,
Whether he's dissecting a play or figuring out how a squid works.
absolutely. And it's important to note that he didn't just sit around thinking about these things. He put this rigorous approach to work in all sorts of fields, practically invented formal logic, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I've heard about his syllogisms. Aren't those like structured arguments that we still use today as like a basis for reasoning?
Exactly. He even dove headfirst into metaphysics, which can
Uh-huh.
get a little,
Metaphysics, yeah, that one always kind of makes my head spin.
think of it as his attempt to understand the very nature of reality. What does it mean for something to exist? And he tackled these huge questions with the same logical rigor he used to study animals or politics.
It's like he's saying no topic is off limits for reason and observation.
That's a great way to put it. And this insatiable curiosity, this dedication to exploring the world with both our senses and our minds, that's what makes Aristotle so relevant even today.
Totally. It's definitely made me curious to dig deeper into some of these ideas.
Well, we're just getting started. We'll be back in a bit to explore even more of his groundbreaking ideas and see how they connect to our lives even centuries later. So we were talking about how Aristotle was all about observation and reason, right? And it's amazing how that led him to insights that still resonate today.
Yeah, like his work in History of Animals. I'm curious about those comparisons he made between different animal body parts.
Oh, right. Like how he compared a hand to a crab's claw.
Yeah, exactly. What was he trying to get at with that?
Well, it seems like he was looking for patterns, like some underlying blueprint that connects different life forms.
Fascinating. So, like, even though they look different on the surface, There's a deeper connection there.
That's what he seemed to be suggesting. He even compared animals that breathe air with those that live in water, noticing the similarities and differences in their respiratory systems.
Wow, that's pretty forward thinking for his time.
It really is, but of course he wasn't always right. I mean, he was working with limited knowledge and technology.
Yeah, everyone makes mistakes.
Of course. For instance, he thought some animals just spontaneously generated from non-living matter.
Oh, right, like insects arising from dew.
Exactly. We know that's not true now, but it shows how he was always trying to make sense of the world based on what he could observe at the time.
It's kind of like how science works today, right?
Yeah.
We're constantly refining our understanding as we gather more evidence.
Precisely. And this brings us to another big theme in Aristotle's work. The idea that pursuing knowledge is essential for living a good life.
Okay, interesting. So it's not just about knowledge for knowledge's sake.
Right. He believed that the more we understand about the world, the better choices we can make, and ultimately, the more fulfilling our lives will be.
I could see that. So how does his concept of the golden mean fit into all of this? You mentioned that earlier.
Ah, yes. The golden mean. It's all about balance, finding that sweet spot between extremes.
Like finding that middle ground.
Exactly. He believed that every virtue has two vices, one of excess and one of deficiency.
Okay, I think I'm following.
So take courage, for instance. It's the mean between recklessness, which is too much, and cowardice, which is too little.
Makes sense.
Or generosity. That lies between extravagance and stinginess. He believed that by cultivating these virtues, by finding that balance in our actions, we could live more fulfilling lives, happier lives.
It makes you wonder if, like, some of the problems we face today come from not embracing that idea of balance enough.
That's a really interesting thought. And it brings us back to another key aspect of Aristotle's philosophy, his focus on human nature.
Yeah, he seemed to place a lot of emphasis on understanding ourselves.
He did. He believed that to live a truly virtuous life, we need to understand our own strengths and weaknesses, our tendencies.
So it's not just about knowing what the right thing to do is, it's also about knowing yourself well enough to actually do it.
Exactly. And this self-awareness is crucial not just for our own growth, but also for how we interact with others.
Because we're social creatures. Right.
Precisely. Aristotle believed that humans naturally thrive in communities where we can work together and support each other.
Which makes me think about his political writings. Did he think some forms of government were better than others at creating these, like, virtuous communities?
Well, he was definitely fascinated by different forms of government. He studied monarchies, aristocracies, democracies, you name it.
But he didn't necessarily think there was a best one.
Right. He didn't think there was a one-size-fits-all solution. He was more interested in how each system worked, its strengths and weaknesses.
So more about analyzing them, prescribing.
Precisely. He believed the most important thing was whether a government, whatever its form, promoted justice and allowed people to live virtuous lives.
It's like he's going beyond specific ideologies and getting to the core principles of a good society.
You got it. And that's what makes his ideas so relevant. Even today, he's reminding us to look beyond the labels and focus on these fundamental values.
It's like he's speaking directly to our current political debates. Amazing how these ideas still resonate after so long.
It really is. It's that timeless quality, that ability to speak to our most basic questions about how to live and how to govern ourselves that makes Aristotle such an enduring figure.
So much to think about. I'm already feeling inspired to go back and explore some of these ideas further.
Me too. There's always something new to discover in Aristotle's works.
I think our listeners are going to feel the same way. But
Okay.
for those who are just starting to explore Aristotle, what would you say is the key takeaway from all of this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that Aristotle's philosophy isn't just some, dusty old textbook stuff.
Yeah, it's not about memorizing a bunch of theories or, winning arguments.
Exactly. It's more about cultivating a certain way of thinking, a habit of mind that focuses on observation and reason, that constant desire to understand the world.
So even if we don't agree with everything he said, we can still learn from how he approached knowledge.
Absolutely. Look at his emphasis on the golden mean. It's not just an ethical principle, it's also a way of approaching life, with balance, moderation.
It makes me think about how extreme everything feels these days, like in politics, on social media, even in our personal lives. Everyone's shouting their opinions, and there's not much room for nuance or middle ground.
That's a really good point. Aristotle might not have all the answers for our modern problems, but his emphasis on reasoned discussion, trying to find common ground, understand different perspectives, well, that feels more important than ever.
It's like he's reminding us to, step back from all the noise and engage with the world in a more thoughtful way.
I like that. And that thoughtful engagement, it applies to everything from how we interact with others to how we grow as individuals.
Right. You were saying earlier how important self-awareness is for Aristotle, understanding our strengths and weaknesses. How do we actually do that, like in a practical way?
It starts with being honest with ourselves, about our tendencies, our habits, the things that trigger us, paying attention to our thoughts and emotions, recognizing where we might lean towards excess or, not enough.
Like that old saying, know thyself.
Exactly. And once we understand ourselves better, then we can work on finding more balance. Maybe we need to be more assertive sometimes or practice more patience when things get tough.
Sounds like a lifelong project.
It is, but that's part of what makes it so interesting. Aristotle believed that personal growth, just like pursuing knowledge, it's a journey, not a destination.
Well said. Wrapping up our deep dive into Aristotle, I'm really struck by the lasting power of his ideas.
Me too. Amazing how someone who lived over 2,000 years ago can still offer us so much wisdom and insight.
I think our listeners will agree that exploring the world of Aristotle is time well spent.
I hope so. And I hope this deep dive has inspired you to keep exploring his work and discover how his philosophy can make your own life richer.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible intellectual adventure. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a fascinating topic.
Until then, stay curious and keep those minds engaged.